anyways, as we continue talking about the presidency, you will have your next test 1 week from, well, basically Wednesday when we come back, right? So a little quick understanding here, you have a chapter 13, the online textbook is due, I want to say that's Tuesday? Monday? No, when you come back. Yeah, so it's Monday night when you come back. There's no homework over spring break, right? So technically you can get that chapter done Monday night after we return if that's what you want to do. The test then over chapters 11, 12, and 13, so really the test over the presidency and Congress. And you'll notice 13 is not necessarily as important as 11 and 12, right? 11 and 12 are really the Congress and the presidency in depth. But that test will be Wednesday the 22nd, excuse me. And your legislation then that you've had now for a little over a week, okay, that will be due on Friday the 24th. I just got my new numbers for AP registration. Anybody in here still not registered for the AP test? That's a lie, Will.
Oh, wait, can I get those?
You must love your mother.
Well, she was telling me to, like, get something. Did she register?
Yeah, you and your sister both registered. Yeah. On the bright side, I'm up to like 170. Okay, and that's just me. And I looked, Ms. Bodie, most of her first period from last semester is registered as well. Still like it to be higher, obviously because of last semester only 60%. I'm only at 60% of what I could be at. All right, so presidential staff. Okay, some of this is actually vital to sort of understanding the presidency. Some of it is actually just slightly entertaining in terms of some of the ways that the presidency used to function, right? Historically, the office of the President of the United States didn't have nearly the staff that it has today, right? Currently, in the movie The Butler does a really good job of going through it. Actually lists like all the positions, but there's like 9 butlers, just butlers on staff at the White House, right? There's something like 22 cooks. Yeah. Literally, if you were the President of the United States, you could you could wake up at 3 in the morning and be like, wow, man, I would really like some Eggs Benedict right now. And call somebody and they would make you some Eggs Benedict at 3 in the morning. Okay? But if you look, I mean, like Lincoln answers his own mail, right? Grover Cleveland answers his own phone. That's kind of comical to think of it today. I'm going to tell you right now, you write Donald Trump a letter, he is never going to read it. Because he might not know how to read. I mean, because he's way too busy. Alright? When you look at the White House staff now, right, so we're well over 500. Alright? There are some advantages and some disadvantages to all that. Okay? Some of the advantages, obviously, a lot of the sort of mundane aspects of life the president doesn't necessarily have to deal with, right? Or the first lady, for that matter. There are probably and especially back in like the 60s, 50s, 60s, during that period of time, there was a significant percentage of people that looked at this as being a little outdated and absurd, okay? Especially when you consider the 9 butlers and 12 maids and whatever else they had. But people were kind of like, what's the first lady doing? That's her. And we're talking about traditional stereotypical roles, right? The woman cooks and cleans and does all that. That's not even remotely close to being possible anymore. The first lady in today's sort of White House as sort of a hostess in the sense that they're constantly meeting people and you know, sort of functioning in a sort of social manner in which you're engaging all sorts of both foreign dignitaries, people from other countries that are important, as well as people within the United States that are important as well.
Melania picked cause, social.
So this is how you know Donald Trump's a little creepy. Apparently the cause that's going to be championed by the First Lady is going to be Ivana's cause of childcare. Like paid maternity leave and childcare for mothers. And there were a lot of people that were kind of creeped out and they were like, Ivana's going to end up being the First Lady. She might actually do that. I mean, her husband is on Trump's staff as an advisor, Jared Kushner. So they moved to DC. They live in DC now. Melania, during the, I can't remember if it was before the actual election or right after. Must have been right after, but she kind of floated the idea out of sort of making her cause internet bullying, which is so ironic, considering her husband is an internet bully. Now, as far as sort of how the president interacts with his staff, understand that a large part of this is going to be based on sort of the president's own sort of attitudes and how the president sort of carries himself. Some are far more engaging with staff than others. Some of them really sort of isolate themselves and don't deal with much of their staff. And when I say staff now, I'm not just talking about like butlers. And some presidents will even isolate themselves from people within the White House staff that are supposed to advise, because they behave in a manner where you don't really want to engage with the president, you know, for fear of losing or fear of being yelled at or whatever. All right, now, White House staff, and this is what we actually call a White House staff, all right? They actually have offices in the White House. Every president in the West Wing, and just so you understand, the West Wing of the White House is where, like, business gets done. Okay, so, because the White House is an actual residency as well. So understand that. I mean, it's an office building where the president does his work, but it is also a residence where the president sleeps. All right. White House staff, there is a little rule here that basically says the closer you are, the more important you are. All right. So you want to get as close to the Oval Office as you possibly can as White House staff. All right. Now, this is important. All right. Because there are two sort of ways in which a president of the United States will structure his White House, all right? And this makes a significant difference in terms of efficiency within the White House, as well as in terms of sort of how well informed or involved a president is, all right? So when you look at somebody like Jimmy Carter, and Carter was not terribly efficient as a president, okay, but Carter used what you would call the hub sort of structure, which means everything came to him, right? And then you had all these spokes that come off, right? And so this would be like the DOD, Department of Defense, right? And here is Secretary of State, Secretary of the Interior, Commerce, Energy, Treasury, right? All these other aspects. And this is what you call, out of the circular method, I like to call it hub, right? Hub and spoke. Okay, think of it more like a tire, right? Okay, so everything sort of revolves around or centers around this. The other option, and this is what Reagan was famous for, was this idea of a structure, and where you have all types of levels, right? And so right here might be the vice president, here would be the secretary of state, right, undersecretary, all the way down, okay? And basically, if this dude could get the job done, he did it. And it just stopped here. And so nobody else knew. And it's actually one of the reasons, and Democrats love to just, they love to rag on Reagan, they really do. One of the things that they like to sort of say that's a negative towards Reagan in the way that he was. Do we remember what the Iran-Contra scandal is? We're selling guns. Selling guns, so Oliver North is the guy who ultimately takes the blame, and he's like an undersecretary, he's way down here. Okay? Ollie North takes the blame for this. We're selling guns to Iran, and then we're turning around and we're giving the profits to the Contras, who are the Sandinistas, the anti-communist group in Nicaragua, right, trying to fight a communist dictatorship down there. Okay? Honestly, there is a significantly good chance that Reagan actually had no idea that this was going on. And not because Reagan is oblivious or because Reagan is sort of checked out in terms of how he ran his White House, but because he structures things this way. In which case, as soon as the job gets done here, okay, when this guy doesn't need to tell him, and then have him make the decision, it stops. And information doesn't go up anymore. In this situation, literally everything goes to Carter, right? And at this point, Carter will spend a significant amount of his time just dealing with intelligence briefings, right? I think it's pretty safe to say that Trump is going to use this, because Trump doesn't even attend his own intelligence briefings, okay? And most people that understood Trump, I think they wholeheartedly believed that Trump would do this, and because that's sort of how he runs his businesses. Okay? It doesn't all come through him. Instead, you see a significant amount of this hierarchical pyramid ideology where if somebody underneath Trump can get it done and doesn't need to talk to Trump, there's no point. Get the job done and move on in life. All right? So, yeah, go ahead. So this is basically what I just said. All right, this is basically what I just explained here when we looked at this on the board. So this circular method of the hub, okay, greater access to information for the president, but it's less efficient because the president is now dealing with more. Okay, the pyramid method provides greater efficiency, but that's at the expense then of information. The president might not always be informed. All right. And so specifically when you see a situation where you've got somebody, let's just say for the sake of argument here, that Ollie North was doing this without the president's approval or even knowledge, and that in and of itself can actually make the president look kind of bad, because that means the president is woefully unaware or out of touch with what's going on really in his own sort of house. All right. White House staff the vast majority of them don't require Senate consent. We talked about this before. This means that they're a little bit more loyal, and the cabinet is not as loyal. All right. Various institutions. OMB, this is the Office of Management and Budget. Okay, this is a White House staff organization, meaning they answer only to the president. And so when Donald Trump, and this is actually what Trump has done, when Trump goes in and tells them, I would like for you to create a budget that shows 6% or 7% growth for the economy over the next 10 years, right? 7% annual growth over the next 10 years, and then we're going to spend accordingly. Okay? That's what OMB does. They then create a budget that says, here's the amount of money we expect to have. That's wholly unrealistic. And hopefully you learned we talked about this before, right? Last semester in economics, you should have learned good economic growth is like 3%. That's really good economic growth for a country, 3% annually. 7% is just absurd. NSC, National Security Council. Okay, so this would be what Flynn was heading up, and what's the new guy's name? McMaster's is now in charge of. CEA, that's the Council of Economic Advisors, right? And so again, this is part of what increases the president's sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Accountability. Like, this is why we part of the reason, I don't want to say it's the only reason, part of the reason why we begin to give the president more credit or more blame based on how the economy is doing, even though ultimately the president's not responsible for spending money. Now, he can only advise. He can't actually tell Congress how to spend money. All right? Cabinet positions, we talked about this a little bit before, right? So, most of our cabinet level positions, these are people that have split loyalties. Their loyalties lie to their individual departments, as well as to the Senate a little bit, as well as the president. They tend to be a little less engaging than White House staff, and again, if we look at the Trump presidency, that seems to definitely be holding true, right? Bannon, Priebus, some of the other guys that he has in his actual White House staff seem to be far more involved in individual decision-making process than Trump's cabinet level members. Our actual cabinet consists of the department heads, so Secretary of State, Treasury, yada, 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 all the way down. And there are others who hold a quote-unquote cabinet rank, but are not officially in that based off of the way that it was defined a while ago, right? So the UN ambassador, which is Nikki Haley, is deemed to be a sort of cabinet level position for whatever reason, okay? Depending on the president, some presidents have been more engaging or more involved with the UN than others, all right? They're all appointed and consented, appointed by the president, and they all require Senate consent, all right? In a parliamentary system, this is not what we have, all right? So understand that. In a parliamentary system, cabinet officials are members of the parliament. They meet regularly, and they deal with public policy, okay? In our system, that is not true. In fact, they are not allowed to be members of Congress, right? So think about Jeff Sessions or Tom Price even. Now, we know who Tom Price is. Health and Human Services, right? He is the Secretary of Health and Human Services. He was a representative, I forget where he was from, okay? Maybe Georgia. Jeff Sessions was a senator from Alabama. These are gentlemen that were appointed to cabinet level positions and forced to resign from their elected positions in Congress. And in our system, the cabinet meets basically whenever the president wants them to. Some presidents meet with their cabinet incredibly infrequently, all right? And then they basically just let the cabinet heads go back and run their own individual departments, and there's not a whole lot of discussion or involvement or engagement, all right? For the most part, most cabinet officials are far more interested in advocating for their own departments than what they are in terms of following a president's ideologies and sort of direction. And this is just one of those things where you see sort of the gross inefficiencies in terms of our government system, right? Yeah, go ahead. And this is everything that I just sort of explained to you, right? So they have to have divided, well, they don't have to. They do have divided loyalties, right? Loyalties to Congress because Congress is the one that gives them their money. Loyalties to their department, loyalties to their employees. They are less responsive to the president than what White House staff is, and that's the ultimate thing that you need to understand there. All right? The president can, of course, fire his appointees if he wants to. But realize once you get underneath those first, like, significant positions, I mean, if Donald Trump wants to fire Jeff Sessions, he can, okay? What's the guy underneath the Attorney General? I can't remember the name now. But that's a position that Trump appoints, right? The guy underneath the Attorney General, he's basically like second in command of the DOJ, except he's not actually in command of anything. His sole, and I forget, Solicitor General. That's his name, or that's his title. Okay? The Solicitor General, his responsibility in terms of government is pretty much solely just to represent the United States in front of the Supreme Court. He actually acts as an attorney more so than a sort of bureaucrat, right? But that's a position, again, that Donald Trump can appoint somebody to and fire somebody from, right? But, like, lower level positions, once you get down outside of those first, like, significantly high positions within the bureaucracy, it's all filled by the Civil Service Department, and the president can't really touch it. And the president of the United States cannot fire an individual FBI agent, all right? It doesn't happen. Okay, selection of the cabinet. One of the primary factors, and this shouldn't surprise anybody, is political affiliation, right, or party affiliation. Did Donald Trump appoint any Democrats to his cabinet? One, Michael Flynn, who didn't last. He's already been removed. There is a history or a tradition of appointing at least one member of the opposing party to a cabinet. And it's probably a good aspect of our traditions, right? You want that sort of dissenting opinion on a cabinet in order to argue or to advocate for the other side. They're generally not put in really important positions. There was a belief that there was, I want to say it was a Democratic senator or representative from like North Dakota, that Trump was floating the idea of naming this woman as Secretary of Energy, I think, which ultimately ended up going to Rick Perry. Right? The next thing, or the other thing that I really want to talk to you down here is this aspect of confirmability. Okay? Whoever the president is appointing needs to be able to be confirmed. For the most part, we haven't had a long-standing tradition of not granting the president whatever staff he wants in terms of cabinets. Hopefully you realize that in 2016-17, this has been considerably more difficult, right? You make the argument that Trump's picked some people that don't have real good confirmability to begin with, but it's also just been, very contentious because of the problems between Republicans and Democrats at this point, all right? As far as the rest of the things go in there, we had done a better job in the United States of appointing a cabinet that was a little bit more diverse, right? We tended to have minorities represented and women on the cabinet, right? We've had multiple female secretaries of state now, which is the quintessential cabinet level position, right? Secretary of State is probably the most important cabinet position that you can have. Trump, let's be honest, we regressed a little bit in that regard, right? Trump's cabinet is pretty much all white. They're all filthy rich. And there's very few women. Yeah. That's it. Other federal positions, okay, so when we talk about like other federal positions, right, one of the things we can really get into here is like federal judgeships, right, meaning, so all federal judges are appointed by the president. We haven't gone through the judiciary branch yet, okay, but what you realize is that there are district courts and then appellate courts and then the Supreme Court at a federal level, And there are a lot of different district courts. Okay? There are an attorney staff that work at the district court. Those are federal positions that are actually appointed by the President of the United States. I'm going to tell you right now, the President might have a list of 15 names that he's looking at any given time for a Supreme Court opening. Okay? But I assure you that there's a list of like 100 names that somebody else in the Department of Justice has put together that says, look, here are people that would be good federal judges for us somewhere. The President is not doing a lot of research into that. Okay? Most of it is coming from outside sources. Okay? When you look at the background of appointees, they come from a wide variety of places. So it just depends. Some of them have more government experience than others. Some of them are part of this revolving door aspect that we've talked about before, right? Especially when you talk about sort of White House level positions, right? Vice President. Okay, I've told you this is like my ultimate goal in life. That's all I want to do is be Vice President of the United States. Because you only have two responsibilities. You become President or acting President if something happens to the President, and you preside over the Senate, but nobody even makes you go and do that job. So literally you have like no jobs, right? And I could spend the next 4 years playing golf. That would be awesome. The Vice President of the United States, I want to say, gets paid like $220,000 a year. Well, the President gets $400,000 a year. Like, he makes like just barely more than half of what the President of the United States makes. And what the VP actually does, it depends. Some of it will actually depend upon the President. Some presidents rely on their Vice President more than others. Some of them don't really rely on him at all. I'm telling you right now, it's really a worthless position. I mean, when I say worthless position, like, it's my dream job, right? But the Vice President of the United States really does not accomplish much at all right? Not much of a responsibility.